Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Catherine Michael, and I am Associate Professor of Political Science at Ohlone College and one of the co-directors of the Lytton Center for History and the Public Good. Along with my colleagues, the other two co-directors, Kyle Livy and Heather McCarty, I would like to extend our warmest welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. At the Lytton Center, we have a number of initiatives and programs, one of which is our speaker series. Today, we are thrilled to have Lauren Wolfe join us for our first event of the semester as she gives her talk, Journalism with a Mission, How Reporting on Atrocities Can Lead to Justice. We will introduce Lauren in just a moment, but for any newcomers to the Lytton Center, I just want to read our mission to give you a bit of additional background for what we aim to do. The Lytton Center considers ways that the study of the past can help shape the present and future. Our mission is to inspire the Ohlone community to work for the public good through programming focused on access, equity, inclusion, justice, and service. The Lytton Center explores challenges facing our community and the world, past, present, and future, and fosters big ideas that will inspire and transform Ohlone and the larger community for the better. Through training, programming, and capacity building, the Lytton Center empowers students to advocate for a just and equitable world. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Eric Bishop, our college superintendent president, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. I am more than excited to welcome Lauren Wolfe to Ohlone College and want to thank the Lytton Center for History and Public Good for hosting this talk. Lauren Wolfe is an award-winning journalist who has written for publications such as The Atlantic and the New York Times. She is the publisher of Chills, where she pulls back the curtain on many years of international investigative reporting. Ms. Wolfe is formerly a columnist at Foreign Policy Magazine, director of WMC Women Under Siege, a journalism project on sexualized violence and conflict originated by Gloria Steinem in the Women's Media Center, and senior editor of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Thank you for being here, Lauren. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I guess it's my turn. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you to the center for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I find what you guys are doing really interesting. So I thought maybe I would start off by telling you a little bit about the basic premise of the talk and like how I got into this. So I can go back to my early reporting days where an editor told me that I know how to write stories that make people cry, but I didn't just want to make people cry. I wanted to actually change things, anything terrible, hopefully make it better. So when I worked at the Committee to Protect Journalists, it was 15 years ago, it was a long time ago, we would report on journalists who were kidnapped, killed, jailed, beaten, everything. So we spent a lot of time talking about the best way to protect them and how to make change in different countries to make the press freer, and how much writing about it would help or hurt. Because if you have a kidnapped journalist, does it help if we're publicizing that they're being held by the Taliban or whoever, or does it actually end up making things worse for that person? And I can answer that question later if you like. But so after that, then I found this project called Women Under Siege about sexualized violence in conflict, which led me to a lot of international reporting. The mission was to talk about rape in war, and it kind of expanded to all kinds of women's issues in war zones, conflict areas, refugee areas. So I spent a lot of time at the Syrian border because the year the project was founded in 2011 was the beginning of the Syrian conflict. So right away, I launched into not just reporting on Syria, but also on Congo. So there's a Democratic Republic of Congo, because there's also Republic of Congo. So this one, but I will get back to that. What I wanted to do actually was first tell you a story that happened just a week or two ago, I guess a couple of weeks now. You've all been watching what happened in Afghanistan. We all know that the Kabul fell, Taliban moved in. What that meant was all of the journalists who are often the prime targets of repressive governments, they don't want free reporting on what they're doing. they're often some of the first people persecuted. So in any case, a friend put me in touch with a friend of hers, so a journalism network, one journalist at this newspaper, one journalist here. And I ended up talking to her about that she was trying to get, in particular, this one family of journalists, a husband, a wife, and the kids were not, the young kids, but get them out of Kabul. And she was hitting up against so many walls. As I'm sure you've read and heard, it is basically impossible to leave Afghanistan right now. And basically you saw what happened at the airport and all of that. So in the meantime, you have journalists who are working for US media outlets, Radio Free Liberty, Radio Europe, RFE/RL, and Voice of America. And those are US government funded outlets. So they were leaving their own people behind who were going to be, possibly killed or at least jailed, at least beaten. I mean, we don't know yet. So she told me she was getting nowhere. So this was a huge issue because it was maybe 600 of these employees had no escape route. I started speaking to other journalists in the US who were trying to help journalists in Afghanistan get out. And they all told me that they were running to senators and, the Office of Government, I think it's called Government and Media, just talking to every press freedom organization, and they're just hitting wall after wall. Like I even had a woman who was fighting for this family ask me, could you ask around, do you happen to know anyone at the Tajik embassy who is like the German embassy in Tajikistan? That's what it was. That's how crazy things got. That was how desperate she was, trying to find a crazy contact from a European country in a third party country. It just was bananas. So we discussed and I said, well, I'm happy to write about this if you think it will help. This idea of like, will publicity actually help? So we decided to write about it, and I ended up speaking to a woman a very young Afghan journalist who was on TV, and she showed up the day after the Taliban took over Kabul. They told her to go home, that she didn't have a job anymore, and a man appeared on TV that day, a Taliban member, took her place. So she had to run because they were coming around searching house to house for journalists and activists. She left her 3 younger brothers behind and was hiding out in what is the former green zone, the former safe zone. She had no escape route. So I ended up speaking to her, and it was pretty devastating because all she kept saying, in very broken English was, I'm trying to save my life. I need help. Somebody please save my life. So I ended up writing about that. I've been forming a partnership with the Washington Monthly, which is a kind of older magazine, a kind of liberal lefty magazine. They do a lot of political stuff and human rights stuff. So it's nice to have a place when you know where your writing is going to land. So they took the story, we did it. It's not the hugest circulation. It's not the Washington Post, right? But at least when you put it out there, things start to happen. And because nobody was reporting on this at all. And a few days later, I mean, you never know exactly if it's your work that caused something, but a few days later, there was a story in the Washington Post, I believe, and USA Today, all attacking this issue in the same way of these US employed journalists are stuck and we need a plan. So because a lot of this happened behind the scenes, again, I don't know that my article directly prompted that, but I kind of have to assume it helped. And then I also hope that it put pressure on Congress, on whoever, although I do know how hard people were working behind the scenes, so many people. I don't know what's happened yet with these journalists. I have to do a follow-up, which is something I like to do, stay in touch with my sources. So that's just sort of a recent example of how you can use reporting to actually enact change. And often it's just sort of a gamble. You're hoping. Actually, every time I've done this, it's a gamble. You decide, where should I publish? How should I write it? What story am I telling? And who needs to hear it? And you hope everybody hears it, but maybe sometimes you want the government to hear it. Maybe you want, people at NGOs to hear it. So I wanted to go back now and talk more about the Syria reporting I was doing. So right after I started this project about rape in war, as I said, the Syria war was starting up in 2011. So I ended up trying something very interesting with the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. So I was working with epidemiologists, and I created a team of Syrian American women, and I think that was it. Researchers, basically. So we had, a few people, and we worked on, I don't know if you've ever heard of a crowd map, but I don't think it even exists anymore. But for a number of years, it was something people were using, like in Egypt, there was a crowd map where people could click on a direct spot, describe what had happened. And in this case, I'm thinking of a very popular one was a harassment map of women in Cairo, or maybe just throughout Egypt. And you would pinpoint a place, a time, and what the incident was. And you were basically creating a data set through public input. So it wasn't that I expected women who had been raped in Syria to click onto a website. I mean, if the internet access is one thing. Second thing is, being raped in most parts of the world is still a shameful subject. Often husbands leave their wives, and especially in Syria, this was happening. So yeah, the idea wasn't to get those women, but maybe someone who knew them would tell their story, and we could start to get a picture of what was happening. And no one had ever tried this in a live war zone. So it was an experiment. It was very interesting. And what ended up happening was we ended up doing 99% of the reporting, or even just gathering, aggregating reports that were out there and pinpointing them on the map and building, hundreds of stories like that. So in the course of doing that, I went to the Syrian border a few times. So on the border with Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and I would seek out women to speak to. And it is a very difficult kind of reporting to do because, again, women don't want to talk about this. But anyway, I heard a number of stories. So I'd been working on that for a while. And then something really interesting happened. A friend of mine, a psychiatrist, actually started out as a source. I ended up calling everyone a friend because they eventually become friends. She contacted me and said, I know of a woman in a Jordanian hospital who has been beaten so badly that she's paralyzed from the neck down. And she's only 27. She's Syrian, and she was a commander in the Free Syrian Army, which existed for a few years as the opposition force within Syria. And she wants to talk to a reporter. She wants to, and she had been raped and tortured twice in captivity. She wanted to tell her story. So that literally would be the first survivor who ever wanted to talk about that I knew of on the record. I think there maybe was one woman who I didn't even get to meet when I was in Turkey. I got to the hospital where she was, but she wasn't a woman, she was a girl, she was 14. So she was very traumatized, and another reporter had already smashed in and kind of made her more traumatized, which is a big risk in what I do. So I can't remember if there'd been any first person accounts at that point. And I was like, yes, I definitely want to talk to her, because the idea of, getting the words from someone's mouth is really incredible. And we worked on I was in New York at that point, I'd left Jordan. So we ended up finding someone who was on the ground, who could interpret and could get a computer in, right? Because phone would have been easier, but I really wanted to video if we could. So we ended up getting basically caught by the hospital, and they didn't want that happening, and the Jordanian government didn't want it happening. I mean, that's how tricky this stuff is. Even though Jordan is an enemy of Syria ostensibly, it's a very complicated region, so you don't really know sometimes what you're up against. But we did end up arranging the interview eventually, and I had already been hearing that she wanted me to use her full name and show her face. And that had certainly never happened in this war. So she would have been sort of putting a face and a name to what was happening to women in Syria. And there were human rights groups out there claiming that there was no sexual violence going on, this was not part of the war, but it's always part of war. And I worked on this subject enough to know that. So I knew the stories that we were gathering were real, at least most of them, or some of them, and that there were many, many more. Because the general rule about rape in wars, basically, or rape anywhere, I believe, is that for every one story you hear, you're not hearing 8 to 10 more. So in any case, I was very excited about the idea of using her full name and showing her face, but there are so many ethical issues involved in that. There are safety issues. I ended up speaking with her, and her story was incredible. I mean, the way she'd been tortured, the pain she was in, she was very depressed, very skinny, very sick. And I think she'd been in that hospital about a year at that point. And her family was back in Syria. So that was an important point to consider. Could there be repercussions if I use her name or her face or both? She told me that she had been divorced, I suppose, after her husband found out about her army work, because she was doing it somehow without him knowing, and he didn't like that. And they divorced. So the children were living with him when she was tortured and crossed the border to the hospital. That made me nervous, because you're then weighing how important is it to put a face to this issue, to the international community, to governments, to let them know this is happening and really make it more concrete for them, versus the danger potentially to her own children because they're still inside Syria. So I had to think about that a lot. And right as I was working on the story, I was in Istanbul at a conference about atrocities, which is probably as depressing as it sounds. But while I was there, I got to speak with 2 people about this issue, 2 important people. One was a woman who worked at Human Rights Watch, and she was appalled when I even suggested whether I should name or show this woman's face. And she said, absolutely not. You're going to get her killed, her family killed. You don't know, but there's definitely going to be damage, and you cannot do this. And I heard her. And as a reporter, the last thing you want to do is get your sources killed. It's terrifying. So then the other person that was there I really wanted to speak to was a reporter named Roy Gutman. He is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist for McClatchy newspapers. And he had pulled back the curtain basically on rape in the Bosnian War, the rape camps. He told me, I believe he was the first person to do what I was wondering whether I should do, by putting a face, a name, and really just like bringing that issue to the world. And he looked at me, he said, you have to do it. So now I'm hearing the exact opposite. So because I feel a sense of, obviously responsibility, I was siding with not doing anything with the human rights person. But then as my reporter self, I understood his point. It's really important as a journalist to really uncover things, make them real, make them interesting and concrete, so that change can happen. And I know a lot of journalists don't think like this. I mean, political journalists don't always think like this. I mean, any kind of journalism, of course, but I find this very gratifying to think about the idea of changing problems, like making them public and hopefully making them better. So he was very convincing. So I want to hear what you guys would do, but I know we're not at the Q&A portion, but if you could just keep that in mind, I'm curious what your decision would be. And I realized I had options. I could use her first and middle name and show her face. I could show I had a photo of her from Skype that was like just her hands in the hospital bed. I could use her full name and not show her face. I could, any combination, or just use her first name and nothing else, right? Do everything, nothing, something in between. So I ended up actually, after basically speaking to 20 more people, and at some point you have to go with what's inside your gut, because people can tell you everything, and I was hearing arguments on both sides, clearly. So, but she kept insisting, and that was another thing to consider. She had her own agency and told me what she wanted. So again, I would wonder, what would you do? Do you want to take away, the right of this person to assert that she wants this public? There was one other factor that went into my decision. She was on heavy duty medication, morphine kind of stuff. So I knew she was not, psychologically without some sort of influence in terms of medication. I also had heard that she was quite depressed. So I began to wonder if she didn't care about her own life and therefore didn't think this was a problem. And in the end, I chose not to do either of those things. What I did was I used her first and middle name, and I showed the photo of her hands. And it was a big decision for me because it didn't get the kind of attention that, and I wrote it for The Atlantic, which is a major publication, but only so many people see stories like this, right? So it didn't do what I wanted, obviously, but at least it was another step forward in naming the problem, which is probably the first step toward creating change. Not that anything has changed all that much in the Syrian war, but in any case, she did end up dying a year later. She killed herself. She had been extremely depressed, and I had been speaking to her psychiatrists, her medical doctors and I had her x-rays. Like I understood that she was in a bad state when I interviewed her. And a year later, basically everyone had stopped visiting her. No more family, no more friends. Nobody was paying for her treatment anymore, which was extremely expensive. So she just grew extremely depressed, and she refused food, she refused water, and she finally just killed herself. So I feel like I made the right decision at the time because I don't think she was thinking clearly. But maybe, I'd really like to come back to it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So what I also want to talk about is not just reporting live, in a situation like that, but how do you think about the future in terms of, can your work now affect something later? I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes you have to do it in creative ways. So in terms of the Syria conflict, because I was so absorbed in it, I was thinking about that question. And one of the things I kept thinking was, how is there going to be justice for all these people committing all these crimes? Whether it's against women or children, or just, you've seen the Caesar photos, they were called, this cache of photos that showed up in the press that showed men who'd been tortured, thousands of men. And I don't know how much you know about the war in the genocide in Rwanda, or what happened in Bosnia, but both of those had their own international criminal tribunals created. So I wondered, is that the route that we can go one day with Syria, or does the International Criminal Court take over? I mean, the two things would be related, but they could be done in different ways. I didn't know a lot about this, but I knew this was a question we were going to have to tackle. And I really thought it would be sooner than now, because there is some form of justice happening for a few people right now, but in terms of the kind of justice that needs to happen, obviously the war is still raging, even though you don't hear about it. There's been a lot of burnout in the media, but mostly a lot of burnout in the audiences. So, although I would say I burned out on it, a lot of my fellow colleagues burned out on it. In any case, in terms of thinking toward the future, I wanted to be able to ask this question and get people thinking. So I ended up speaking to a lawyer who had been I think she had created it basically, and was the lead prosecutor, I believe, on Rwanda. So she was the first person to get convictions for rape as a weapon of war. I believe that's what it was. There's also a crime against humanity. Maybe it was both. I don't even know, but she was the first one to do it. She's brilliant. Her name is Patricia Sellers. And I found speaking to her incomprehensible because she is so smart and speaks in legalese, and I don't know that language. But I spoke to her. I spoke to investigators, international human rights investigators at the UN, so many people. And also this was something I had to think about while I was gathering information on this crowd map. What do we need for this to potentially become evidence one day? How, are there certain requirements? What should we be looking for? So actually, to that end, a really interesting thing happened at one point. I had heard a story about, and it was a second or third hand story about, excuse me, about women, I forget, let me think of the one story. Sorry, I'm I'm gonna go back, I'm going too many places. Let me go back. Right, so in terms of, I was thinking about information for the crowd map. The interesting thing that happened was I heard a story where the men who had broken into the home of the survivor, the woman, had said to her, I can't remember the exact phrase, you know, you want this country to fall, like I'll make this country fall, like something political, something about Assad, and it was very specific. And then I heard a different report about that. So then you're wondering, okay, but are these things just fiction that are being passed around and therefore the story is changing? So it's really hard to do, and you can't, well, I wasn't someone who was going to go inside Syria, which is a whole different decision, you know, to think about, because I have colleagues who did that. I was just not someone who wanted to be inside that war zone, but I did, like I said, go to the border a lot. So the interesting thing was I then started hearing more reports of that. And then I spoke to someone who had documented rape in war, and I think it was Bosnia, where something similar was happening, where they were hearing, oh no, you know what it was? It was Zimbabwe, actually. It was political violence, election violence. They started hearing the same phrase, that men would attack women and say the same thing. So they knew at the time that this had to be, if not organized, at least coming from the same place, the same political area. So that really helped them when they were prosecuting the case, which they did in South Africa, because there's a mechanism of law where you can take something to a different country as long as there's some sort of connection with property, and I don't know the other requirements, but in any case, they were able to prosecute this case in South Africa and get a conviction, partly because they had noticed this pattern. They were able to prove that this was a real thing, and knowing that information made my information very interesting to me. You know, can I keep filling this out? Is this going to be important? So that's one of the things I was thinking about a lot. What kind of information is important when you're doing this work? You know, I don't know how many of you have taken law courses, but I had to take one media law course when I did graduate school. And man, I did not understand the word, like I said. So I ended up writing the story. I don't remember, for the Atlantic, it might've been the Nation magazine. And it was, what will it take to get justice for these rape survivors? And I've talked to people since, and people are batting around different ideas still. There is some sort of movement in Germany where there are current trials underway. I need to learn more about them because I'm not really reporting on Syria at this point. But hopefully now, the work I've done, if not helping people with a roadmap, I mean, helping the public understand, or even helping other people in the legal space think of ideas and see cases, at least it will help me pay attention as we go forward and be able to report more coherently so that people understand what's happening when it starts happening. I want to thank the interpreters, by the way, who I believe are switching off now. You guys are incredible. Thank you. Okay. So moving on from this terrible legal framework story I did, which I feel is important, but to me, that kind of reporting is very dry. I like to tell stories, you know, really be somewhere. So that brings me to a story I reported on for almost 7 years in Congo. What had happened was I went with this amazing group called the Nobel Women's Initiative. So it was all the Nobel laureates, the women Nobel laureates. They take journalists and activists and philanthropists on these trips through various countries, and they speak to women's rights leaders, human rights leaders. You get to hear from survivors of things like rape, or just whatever issues are happening with women in those countries. It's kind of like a specialized trip where they arrange meetings with governments. And like I went on one through Central America with them, Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, and we met, you know, with the foreign minister of Honduras. I mean, really great stuff because you get to really understand what's going on from the inside. In any case, I went on another trip with them because I love that one so much. I went to Congo with them. And we went with Lema Bowie, the Nobel laureate from Liberia, if you know her. And during one of our sessions, so one of the most important parts of why we were there was really, like I said, to listen to the survivors. So women came, some of them walked for, I heard, 2 or 3 days just to get here, knowing that Lema was there, knowing that we were international journalists and whoever, that they wanted us to hear their stories. So that was really incredible. I mean, it's an incredible resource. And there were a couple dozen women at least that day. We spent hours listening to each of their stories, and they were brutal, many of them, young girls, again, like 14, 15. One was there, I think she was 16 at the time, with a baby that she had been raped and given birth to and couldn't care for because it's such an incredibly poor country and she had no resources, except she said, all the clothes I'm wearing, this is what I have. I mean, it was such an incredibly devastating meeting. I won't even continue with the details, but at one point I took a break and I got up and went to the back of the room because we were all seated at a conference table. And I was speaking to someone from an international nonprofit. And we were talking about what was going on, what was she seeing right now? And because the war in Congo is always shifting. There are so many different groups. It's usually in the east or like the middle of the country, not so much on the west, which is where Kinshasa, the capital, is. And it's 900 miles away from each other, the east and west coast. Not coast because they're landlocked, but you know what I mean? There is no way to drive across that country. It's that disconnected. There's no road system. And people are so poor, flying is nearly impossible as well. So it often feels like what happens in the east, where the war is happening, is incredibly disconnected from the capital and where the government is. In any case, so I was standing in the back of that room, and the woman said to me, well, I've heard about a few cases of babies being raped. And I know this is really dark, and I apologize in advance. She said, I've heard about, I think it's 3 cases of 3 and 4-year-olds. I mean, that's just crazy. I'm sorry, I was blown away. And I thought, wow, I think maybe I should do a story on this, but I don't know enough about it. She didn't know enough about it. So I spent a while kind of looking into that and kept it in the back of my mind. You know, were they the same perpetrators? Like, who was doing this? But nobody knew. And it was all around the same area, but it was only, a few of them, and they had stopped. But then when I got back to New York, I kept paying attention. I kept talking to my sources, and they started again, maybe 6 months later, and then they kept going. So it grew from like 3 or 4 to a dozen. Then it was 2 dozen. Then it was 3 dozen. Not kidding. And this was happening over the space of a year or 2. And the girls were, again, anywhere from less than 2 years old to maybe 12 years old. And they were being taken from their houses at night. And these are shacks, really, like mud and wood slat kind of houses, really no security. Often they wouldn't even have a door. But these were big families usually. So they were often like a number of children in one room or sleeping in the same bed. Nobody would wake up. The parents wouldn't wake up, the siblings wouldn't wake up. The girl would just disappear. And then the family would wake up hours later and say, where's our daughter? And the community would sort of mount a search. It was usually in the middle of the night. And the girl would be found in most cases in a field, abandoned and bleeding, and had been attacked. It was this bizarre mystery, and it just kept going. So it's going and going, and I'm sitting in New York going, what the hell is happening? And I realized there's no, at that point, the government, it's always a massive issue of corruption there, but it was even worse at that point. So it was in 2014, 15, right? Eventually, I kept hearing so much about this, and I thought, this is really insane that nobody's doing anything. Because as far as I knew, there were, a few UN and human rights groups interested in this and looking into it, but nobody really had any answers yet. And there was no official seeming investigation by police, by anyone. And I decided I had to go back, because the only way to figure out what was going on was to just fly thousands of miles back and report on the ground. And then there's a whole issue of the danger and the preparations you have to make, but we can talk about that if you want me to later. So I went back, and within a few days, I had a suspect in mind just from speaking to people. And what I learned was that it's very hard for people in places like that, when they are at such risk, to actually discuss these things. So it's not that some of them didn't think they knew who was doing it, they couldn't talk about it. People get killed there very easily, robbed. It's a very, very difficult place to live. So I had this suspect in mind. It turned out that he was a member of parliament, which may have explained why nobody was naming him, and that there was one investigator assigned to the case. It turned out this man was brilliant. He was on the guy's tail. So I came to it, went to him, was able to get confirmation that I was on the right track. And he said, but please don't publish anything before my investigation is done and I make arrests. He said, I'm almost there. So I went home because I stayed longer. He said, stay longer. I'd been there a couple of weeks, and he said, stay a few more days because I think this weekend I can get the arrest warrant signed and make the arrests. And it wasn't just this one man. He had formed his own sort of militia, and they were attacking the girls. And the reason they were doing it was because they had spoken to a sorcerer. Basically, there's a big belief in witchcraft in many parts of that country. The man had told them that it's a little complicated, they were guarding this plantation that they were squatting on, and the army, the Congolese army, wanted them off the land. It's a longer story. So they kept having gunfights, right? And they were afraid of dying. So this witch doctor, sorcerer guy told them, well, here's a way that you can be impervious to bullets. I know it sounds crazy, but again, I also spoke to even a Swedish doctor I spoke to there, told me weird things happen here, and sometimes there's no explanation. So anyway, I understand how deeply entrenched that belief is. But this guy told them that he had to rape young girls, virgins, and that the blood would purify them and make them impervious to bullets. So it was horrific. I mean, that's horrific. So I stayed longer waiting for these arrests, and we didn't know how many, whether there were 100 men, were there 300, how big was this militia? I didn't know. The police officer, I don't think he knew. Nobody seemed to know. And the arrest didn't happen. He said, the government won't give me the warrants yet. So I went back to New York, and that was in January of 2015, maybe, I don't know, 16. In any case, I was in constant touch with the guy and with all my sources. And at that point, I think there'd been 36 or 7 cases. And when I got home, they kept happening. Actually, I think there were more like 40 something at that point. So I got home in the beginning of January, and 4 more girls were raped in the next 4 or 5 months. And I'm sitting there wondering what the hell is happening. Why are these arrests not happening? And I'm talking to the police officer, and he's saying, I can't get the warrant signed yet. And I don't really understand why. And also, speaking of interpreters and translators, I'm doing all of this, speaking to translators. My French is terrible. So they mostly only speak French and Swahili in that part of the country. There are many other languages, but those were the primary languages I was dealing with. I sat around in New York. I had written my story, and I had first pitched it before I went back to Congo. I pitched it to The Guardian. They have a long form section. I'd never written for them, but they liked the story, and I was so pleased they took it. I thought, okay, I can publicize this horrible thing, which people should know about. Because I kept thinking, if one little baby were raped in my Brooklyn neighborhood, it would be all over the news, and people would be demanding justice. But this was dozens over years. And nobody I knew anything about it. Nobody cared. The government was doing nothing. Although I won't say nobody cared. A lot of people obviously cared, but couldn't do anything. I wrote my story. I worked on it with my editor, and I held it because I was planning to publish it as soon as the arrests were made. And that's not something every journalist would do, or I would do in every situation. But in this case, the idea was, if I publish it, I could jeopardize the investigation, the arrests, the prosecution. If I named the man who I knew was the perpetrator, I didn't want to mess with any of that. And sometimes as a journalist, there's a line, and of course, a lot of journalists cross it. But in a situation like this, where you're dealing with like the lives of children, I just wanted to do. I wanted to be as cautious as possible. But again, same thing, you want people to be aware so that this can stop. I think it was 4 months, 5 months, however many months that is, 6 months. It was June, and I was getting really sick of this. I spoke to my editor. I had an idea. I thought, okay, if I can't publish the piece yet, what I can do is publish something that will not name the man, but talk about the fact that I know that the government knows who this is, that they are not arresting him, that the rapes are continuing, and that makes sort of, it is a threat, I guess, but in this case, I was desperate. And basically say, if you don't go ahead and do something about it, I'm going to publish everything and you're going to look terrible. So I published an op-ed in The Guardian. So I wrote it in first person, an opinion piece, and I went to bed. And in the middle of the night, I got up and checked my email or my texts. At that point, I was never sleeping because of the time differences and always working with Congo and different countries. So it was 3 a.m. I look and I had a text from the police officer saying, we just arrested the member of parliament and 68 of his men, and you can go ahead and publish everything now. And it was 4 hours after the op-ed came out. So that was pretty incredible because you don't really get that kind of gratification in your career as a journalist, but it was very direct. And this is not to take away from the many international organizations that then, had been working on it and then made justice happen. Actually, it was incredible. But I do think that shows the power of media, like what you really can do if you do it carefully and talk to the right people and think a lot about it. So that was pretty incredible. And then I went ahead and published the main piece, and I was very, very, very happy. That was the biggest gamble I think I'd ever taken. But I already knew that they were susceptible, the Congolese government was susceptible to international pressure because I'd written something earlier about, I can't remember what it was, reparations for women who had been raped. And basically the one case, like courts often say, yes, these women can have reparations. And then the one case in which they were paid out to 14 women, the lawyer had brought 14 women who were not part of the case. The money was given to them and they disappeared. So I wrote about this, and the government kind of freaked out a little and got in touch with me and wanted to talk about it. And so that was why I felt like this might be a good move. In any case, my throat is getting dry, and I know it's a little early to open up to questions, but I really do want to hear what you have to ask. And I basically told you a whole bunch about a lot of things, but I'm curious what you guys are thinking.
Lauren, thank you for that. As someone who has a journalism background, I was a journalism major, taught journalism for a number of years, I'd like to just start by saying thank you, because I think you embody what the mission of journalism is in terms of the work you do. And it's not about the flash and the substance. I mean, the flash and the emptiness, but really about the substance and telling stories that make a difference. So thank you for that. And then I just want to ask the first question. I may have many, but I'm going to try to let the rest of the audience answer. What is the thing that you think our students can do to become more enjoyed as activists in their future careers?
Become more what?
How could they really embody being activists in their careers?
Well, it's an interesting thing because, as you know, and many in the audience probably know, that it's so insider baseball. Most people probably don't know, but there's a lot of insider baseball within journalism circles. But there's a lot of debate about, can journalists be activists? Can you do activist journalism? And I have been called an activist mostly by male journalists for most of my career. I've been called an activist. They deny my place as a reporter, even though I published in these major places, sometimes in better places than they ever have. But they would look at me. I literally had a guy look at me and say, "But you're an activist." And I was like, oh my God. So that was kind of the undercurrent, because as a woman, I think it's hard to get recognition in so many fields by her male colleagues. But yeah, I don't believe it. I don't think of it as activist journalism because I think people have a negative idea. But I do think, like I said, all of this to me is about creating change and advocacy through journalism. But I think when I worked in press freedom, that was a kind of activism, advocacy, but I was also working as an editor. I'm trying to think, I mean, I really feel like if you find an issue that you care about, I would urge you to find the organizations working on it. Start reading, whether it's local, national, global, there's going to be some sort of nonprofit working on that issue. And you can read everything they're doing. You can start to intern for them or look for a job with them. Also, read everything that they're publishing, because they're going to lead you to the people who are in the place. You're going to read their stories, you then read the media that's covering it, and you're going to get some really great firsthand stories being told. And that will help broaden your ideas of what you should do and what you can do. But just know that there's likely an existing framework. And before you, I mean, I'm someone who just kind of went off and started my own things everywhere, but sometimes I had to realize there's already people doing this incredible work. So.
Thank you so much for that response. I have a question from one of our members of our audience who also happens to be named Kyle. So I'm going to ask it. Before you begin reporting about a topic or a story, how do you prepare yourself mentally and physically about the subject? So for instance, you've been talking a lot about violence and rape. These are really heavy topics, especially for women. What keeps you going? How do you prepare?
That is a great question that I should have asked myself many years ago, because like a lot of my colleagues, you end up doing these heavy stories and you're not prepared for it. You just kind of dive in because you're a reporter and you want to get the story and you want to tell the story. And I did it so many times without thinking ahead, and I ended up kind of hurting myself mentally in a lot of ways. But I also figured out eventually how to get better at preparing. And honestly, I think that's such a great question, because again, preparation will save your life, basically, and also save your mental health. So the first time I came home from one of these massive reporting trips from a war zone, I think I just drank a lot. Next time I yelled at my spouse a lot. Next time I had nightmares. The next time I wrote, I think it was 8 2,000-word pieces in a week. Like, it just went bananas, like work. And then ever since, I think I've been finding a balance of not freaking out after, but you do have to take time for yourself. In terms of preparation, the most important thing that you can do anywhere you're going, again, whether it's local or international, whether it's in a war zone or just, you know, a city block you're going to report about something there, you have to get to know the people there. You have to let them guide you. They know better than you what's safe, what's not. They also can introduce you to people and help you understand things better. When you're working internationally in a dangerous place, or even in a place that's just very foreign to you and you don't speak the language, you can hire what's called a fixer. And a fixer is a local person. They're considered media workers, basically, but maybe not. They're not always considered journalists, but some are journalists as well, working for different outlets. But they will help introduce you to people, set up appointments for you, even interpret for you or translate for you. You often need a driver as well. But the most important thing I think about a fixer, especially when I was in Congo, was, and actually I was once at the Turkish border of Syria, and I had a fixer who was from Aleppo. And he came to me the next day and said that this Shabiha, these were the Assad government thugs, like they were massive. They just looked crazy. And they were crazy. They were the people carrying out a lot of the crimes on behalf of the regime, that they had come to this small Turkish town. And he said, we have to leave right now. And I would never have known that. And I would have been a target. So having that person with the local lay of the land is one of the most important things you can work on. And you will pay out of your own pocket often. I mean, if you're not employed by a news agency, I have spent a lot of money in my career and not just laid it out, but just not gotten it back. So I've had to do other work to kind of support that. But when I think a story is really important, that then if I can afford it, I would do it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that additional insight with us. Our students are very interested in the psychological impact of reporting. So the next question I have is also going to fall along into that, but hopefully in a more positive direction. And the question posed by one of our students is, how were you feeling when you found out that the men were arrested and that you finally had the chance to bring awareness to this issue?
I it was high. I'm still high when I think about it. I literally just got chills. And it was years ago. I mean, I really, really couldn't believe it. I'm literally having chills. Like I said, most journalists, and I think most people don't get that kind of gratification in their lives. And it was such a large community of us, whether it was in Congo or Switzerland or just so many countries we've been working on this together. It was just so thrilling. I mean, I can't describe it. I don't even remember the second part of the question. It was just, yeah.
No, you answered it. You answered it. Thank you.
So I'm actually going to go back to something you asked us to consider earlier, which was, what would we do when revealing a source could have potentially devastating safety consequences?
Versus incredible power for that story, yeah.
Right. And so I'm actually going to just repose it to the audience in the hope that we'll get some responses, and say to the audience members, if a source told you they wanted to go public, but you knew there were various other things to consider, just as one example, and Lauren could maybe review some of these again, but one that she mentioned was being on heavy medication like morphine. What would you do? Would you use the source's full name, part of the name, a picture? So I'm going to post this in the chat right now, and with the hope that some of you in the audience will actually give us your responses in the Q&A so that we could get a little conversation going. And so I'm going to leave that and we'll go on to the next question, and you all post your responses and we can come back to it.
I would also ask, I'm curious, because to me, once I realized it, the idea of personal agency felt really important to me, that someone who had been so paralyzed and taken, all of her power had been taken away, I felt like I didn't want to do that as well. So yeah. And you do have to consider that on every story you do, basically. You're telling someone else's story. So
Okay, so as we're waiting for those to come in and to see some of those responses, I keep thinking about this idea of moral courage. It's so central to the work that you do, and the work that journalists and activists do in these kinds of complex situations. As you were talking, I was taking some notes, and I heard you say something that really stuck out to me, which was, it's my duty to uncover things, make them real, and make things happen. So what do you think right now, thinking about where the world is, where we are locally, perhaps within the United States, maybe different parts of the US, but certainly looking all across the globe, what are the problems that you think journalists need to most make real right now? And how do you think journalists could do this in the best way, from your vantage point?
obviously, I'm not covering Afghanistan except for a couple of stories I did on these journalists. Obviously, what's happening in Afghanistan to the people that were left behind is just a massive story. There are so many stories about it. But I have my own pet kind of thing that I feel like is really important right now with what happened in the last 4 years, the way fake news became this like rallying cry, and the vilification of the US media, or most media. We have one of the freest presses in the world. Our laws are incredibly on the side of the press, defamation, all of that. Like even England is much stricter about this stuff. We have a lot of leeway here, and that can lead to some bad journalism, of course. At the same time, because I've worked so much on press freedom, every country, as from Russia to, Russia to Syria before the war, anywhere, there's state media. Okay, I think China and Russia, state media. That's the only real media you're going to get. And it's propaganda. It's from the government. So people here, I feel like when they, not just call everything I and everyone I know right fake news. I had tweets at me saying, "You're fake news." I was like, okay, I am fake news, cool. But I think it's our duty right now as journalists to show the public how journalism is made, and that it's not fake, and that there are different kinds of journalism. And one of the biggest problems I see in this country is that I don't even own a television, so I'm a weirdo journalist, but I don't watch cable news. I watch occasional things online, but I find that, there are some incredible cable news reporters, don't get me wrong. But there's so much punditry that is disguised as news, so it's just opinion, that the lines are being so crossed, and I feel like it's really confused people, and it's our duty as the people creating this stuff to make sure people understand what's what. I mean, yes, I would love it if people stopped shouting fake news, but there is fake news, and it's important more than ever to sort the disinformation from the actual facts. And I feel like that's on us. I don't think that's on the audience to have to figure that out. I think it's on us to explain what we're doing. So that's one thing I've been trying to do on my Chill site, is kind of give the backstory of the decisions that I made and the ethical considerations, like everything I was just talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about this a lot on another side in terms of education and working with students, and as in teaching history, which there's also lots of fake history out there, as you're probably well aware. That's also become a thing where people,
if I hear one more story about how a lot of people today don't believe a man landed on the moon more than ever, I mean, I'm really, it's true. I mean, like, hearing.
There is this kind of imperative, and I think we've talked about it as like media literacy, but it really is a kind of critical thinking that is, it's more than just an essential life skill, it's an essential democracy skill. Like, in order to have a democratic institution, you need to have an educated, critical thinking populace. And
that's exactly what I think about too, this idea of like, I feel like American education has also really failed, because critical thinking is not something that is considered essential somehow in many places. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, as you've been talking about this and you were sort of talking about this idea of fake news, you're right, it's the responsibility of media to work with its audience, but it is also the responsibility of communities to educate folks, to engage with media, to engage with all sorts of different kinds of sources and understand what they mean. And I won't speak for my wonderful colleagues, but it's changed how I've taught in my 20 plus years of teaching. I teach history differently because of that. Like, I start in a very different way. So
what is the change? What do you mean you start?
There is this kind of thing, you might have remember being in a history class at one point or another, or in political science, or that it's very content focused. And I have really flipped that around in my classes, where I talk about method. How did we get to the story? Like, where does this come from? And to get students to kind of, and I think this is what's actually the most amazing thing about all of these different disciplines, and something that connects a lot of the disciplines that our students get a chance to explore here at Ohlone, is that this idea of making something, like you are on the ground able to make something. Make history is what I tell students. We're going to make history. We're not going to just learn a set of facts, but to learn where it comes from. And so it really has shifted the whole posture and orientation of those kinds of classes.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Also, it makes me think of, I remember when in the past hour I used the word create, and I was thinking about it as I said it, but in the sense of like being a journalist, you're a creator of a story, you're a creator of the tale, the narrative that's going to be in the public mind, and then becomes history to some degree, back and forth. But yeah, I think I'm taking more of the blame on the journalism side, as opposed to making the readers and listeners and watchers, or whatever, making that. But
it's a team effort. Everyone.
That's partly because I've been yelled at quite a bit by people on Twitter when I've said as much, that I think people need to think more critically, and they say it's not my job, it's your job to explain. So I've tried to kind of take that into consideration. But I think you're right, it's a two-sided problem.
Pass it on.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I agree. It is a two-sided problem. It actually, I agree with you, Kyle. How I think about and teach history changes too. At one point, Lauren, you said in your talk, you mentioned how you were thinking about the ways in which your work connects out to the future. Like, is this going to be something that's going to lead to these war tribunals or something else, right? You made this point about how that connects out. I was thinking, and you were thinking of your work about how does it impact the future. I'm thinking about it from the historian's perspective of how does your work impact the future even further down the road? Because what you're writing will become the primary sources that, 50 years from now, folks are going to turn back to say, what was really happening in Syria? And your work is going to be the primary sources that historians look back on and use and call up. So, I think it's an even longer, no pressure at all.
No, but that brings me, I talk a lot about this, but again, it's maybe a little insider baseball, but journalism has changed so abruptly, since the rise of the internet. And I started in the year 2000, basically. So I've been sort of through the whole everything is changing situation. There's so much false stuff out there, but also I've seen a decline in quality in most places, you know. There's some amazing work being done, but in terms of like a lot of bad journalism, I went from knowing many older, very experienced journalists, and I was really lucky. I worked at the New York Times at the very beginning of my career with some of the best journalists in the world, Jim Dwyer, Eric Lytton, like amazing people. And I learned most of what I know from them. I then, you know, had another kind of mentor at CPJ who had been an AP desk editor during September 11th, or the AP desk editor. So I was really taught by people with extensive knowledge and experience. So I consider it my duty now. It's weird when you flip from being the student to the teacher, but in the last number of years, I've realized actually I have stuff to share with people. But because of what's happened in the last number of years, the economy really collapsing, whether it was, you know, for the recession in 2007-8, what's happened recently, that means that legacy is the wrong word, older journalists, experienced journalists don't keep their jobs. And it's not always that they're fired, it's that they're given great packages to move on because the companies can't afford them anymore. So then you end up with a bunch of very young kids, which doesn't mean they're bad journalists. I have actually had an incredible editor years ago at the Atlantic, 26, and he's now a columnist at the Times. He's fantastic. But you do end up with people with less experience. And I feel like that's contributing to this problem because the practices are really, they have to be rigorous, and you don't just know them, you learn them. And most people don't go to journalism school. They don't have people like you telling them how to do these things. So you have to rely on your colleagues and the mentors, and yeah.
Well, thank you for taking up that mantle. I appreciate it.
I love mentoring. I think it's great. Yeah. I didn't have one when I was young. Yeah.
Well, I think that is the piece that helps to backfill for that as journalism shifts and as veterans move on and as resources for investigative journalism disappear, you know, it is really you play this, you know, kind of linchpin role. So thank you for that. I will shift us on back to the questions from our audience because we got a little excitedly sidetracked. This question is, how can the media hold the Biden administration accountable for what's happening to Haitian women, men, and children at the border?
I know. It's funny because I was just talking to my dad before this talk. He said, they're going to ask you about the Haitian people at the border. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. But
our students definitely.
It got me thinking.
Your dad was right.
Sorry. So the exact question was, how should the media frame it, or what was the?
The exact question was, how can the media hold the Biden administration accountable for what's happening to the Haitian women, men, and children at the border? I think it kind of connects back to some of those questions about what is the role of journalism? Is it advocacy? Those kinds of things.
Right. And I've actually, because I've been thinking about it since we talked about it today, I feel like if this were still the Trump administration, the media would be going bananas on him, right? On the administration. I do see there's, you know, obviously the special ambassador or representative just resigned today, I guess, yesterday. So, you know, there are people fighting back, and there have been media stories about what a nightmare this is, and those horrible photos of men on horses whipping Haitian. I mean, it's sickening. I do feel like there's been some backlash. There's also been some Congress members, I believe, right? They've started speaking out, some Democrats even. But again, I feel like the media, yeah, there is something to be said by the way the media failed during the election last 2016, you know, the way Trump was covered because he was so sensationalist, to give it too much attention, the stupid stuff, and make a bigger deal out of things that weren't important as opposed to focusing on what was important. So now I actually think it's a challenge to the media to recognize that there are still these massive issues like immigration at the border and the way these Haitians are being treated. In terms of what we would do as journalists, I mean, I've been thinking about it for years just because of the stuff at the border with Trump and DHS, and I don't have an answer. I mean, all I would say is that I think people need to go there, which is harder right now with COVID, but you need to go somewhere, speak to the people, see what they want, see how they're living, tell people how they're living. And I think that's the best thing you can do as a reporter, is really just be a witness. and make sure that people hear it. Yeah, I don't have some. Do any of you have an answer? Tell me.
I do not have a magic answer to that question at all.
I'm curious what the student thinks. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the hard part about all this. We're all still learning how to do these things, even though we may be the adults or the teachers or I don't always know. I don't know.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on it, Lauren. I also do not know, unfortunately, the magic answer either. We did get a few responses to the question you'd asked to consider. I don't know, Lauren, if you're able to open the Q&A. I can read them, but they're kind of long,
I see
so it might help.
Yeah.
We have 3 different ones. So the first student who responded, or the first audience member who responded, basically said they'd use their picture and only part of the name, but they would like to hear your thoughts about desensitization in media.
I see that one. Okay. From Kyle. Hi, Kyle. First one, use her picture and part of her name. You would use her face. Huh, that's interesting. Okay. Hearing your story definitely makes me wonder what is the correct decision. Desensitization in media. Can you clarify though what you mean? Because I'm not sure if you mean that media has become desensitized in the way we cover stuff, or you mean that the media coverage desensitizes people.
I think it might mean media coverage desensitizes its audience. Yeah.
Like too much coverage. I mean, it's true. Like I said, with Syria, that's a serious case of desensitization. We have
there's a follow-up comment. It says, I say this because I know that some people on social media say that people should desensitize violence because it does more harm than good in terms of how it affects the reader.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know what you guys do in terms of trigger warnings, but I get yelled at a lot because I don't trigger warning my tweets or my work because I'm affected by certain things terribly too, but the headline is usually enough to know. If you know what I cover, you're following me on Twitter, you know that I'm going to be tweeting about these difficult things. I've never really thought about this though. Should desensitize violence. I don't know that you can though, because if I kept telling you these specific stories of these little girls in Congo, you would not like, there's no way to desensitize us as humans to that. And I think that's what makes it important to keep telling these stories. And if we do become desensitized, isn't that sort of defeating the purpose? Because like I said, in Syria, think about it. When's the last time you heard or read a story about Syria? And yet the war, because it's at sort of a stalemate, people don't care anymore. Also, it's just been so many years that people don't want to hear it anymore. Journalists are tired. People don't care anymore. We've moved on as a country and as a world. I mean, I blame myself partly for that because I've stopped too, but I think that's a very bad thing. I think we've become desensitized. I don't know how we change that though. I mean, I guess just tackle it differently or tell new stories. I don't know. Good question.
Do you, Catherine, should I jump in? Yeah, okay. We're like, playing the, actually, I think that point about Syria kind of leads really well into the next question, because we're really curious. I mean, I think part of seeing that media coverage drop off, and I know personally, I got a lot of my media coverage about Syria from sources like BBC World Service, where I would, I'd be in the car, listening to what was going on, and then to see that really kind of disappear in our media, especially during COVID. What do you think is the future of Syria in the near term based on your reporting experience? What do you think is going to happen?
I mean, what I know from the little bit of attention I've been paying to the situation is that, Assad has taken over most of the country. There's basically one little stronghold, I believe, that he has not conquered. There are thousands and thousands of political prisoners, atrocities being committed still. The aid from the UN doesn't really get to cross the border. I mean, the future is, someone needs to start paying attention, whether it's at the UN or the International Criminal Court. but I think there's a chance maybe. I mean, I'm feeling more interested in covering it as I'm talking about it. Maybe there's a chance to kind of bring this story up in a way that makes people care. And I think that's the first question I tend to ask myself, like, why do I care about this? Why should other people care about this? And then you figure out how to tell it. Or sometimes, you know, it goes the other way, that someone tells you something and then you think that's interesting. Sorry, these are like non-answers because I don't
No,
know.
actually, I mean, I was asking a question that's almost essentially impossible to answer, right? It's a very, you know, subjective, you know, your own perspective on this. I think it's really hard to see. I mean, I think about this in teaching modern world history, and you know, I do spend a lot of time at the end of the course on the present, right? And students will ask, well, what do you think is going to happen now? And I'm like, historians don't get into that. Like, luckily I get to cut it off, but that's part of what we want to inspire students, you know, in all of the work they do, to think about like where they have this potential to make change. And so I love this idea of, when you think about a story, what makes you care about it and what is going to make people care about it. And so just starting in that place and then thinking about what it might be like to start exploring Syria again.
That's always been my rule. If I don't understand something, I'm going to assume I'm not the only one, right? So I try to always think like that, think like my reader, because if I'm curious about something, maybe they're curious about something, you know.
And then you go off and do research and explore. We actually, noticing in our participants, we have one of our amazing librarians, Sim Castro. You know, you go to the library, you work with with amazing librarians and archivists. You go out into the field, you interview and connect with people.
That is the first step in journalism too. I mean, before you even go out and interview people, you're just sitting there gathering everything that's ever been written on this and reading.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, that was a really hard question. I apologize. Point withdrawn. We'll pass it on.
I'll give you the softball question, but the question that students always want to know, which is, in your case, when did you realize that you wanted to be a journalist, and then sort of what triggered that discovery?
Oh, actually, that's a better question than the one I usually get, which is like, how did you get into it? You know, because my path has been non-traditional in journalism, but then again, I think at this point, anyone starting out, the traditional path in journalism, which was starting at a low level at like maybe a local regional newspaper, and then moving up there, and then maybe moving to a national newspaper, you know, step by step by step. I didn't do any of that. I kind of went all around the place. And actually, journalism was, I had a career in museums. I was working at the Met Museum for 5 years and the Guggenheim in Venice. I just always loved to write. I mean, through college, and I recommend this for everyone if you have an interest in writing. I would just always have a notebook on me. I still do. And I don't do this anymore, but sometimes I try to make myself, but I would write all day, you know, whether in college, like I'd be sitting at my work study job and just, you know, observing things and writing. And slowly but surely, I became less self-conscious as I wrote. And I didn't often read back what I'd write. It just was like a way to kind of, it actually became bizarre because I felt like nothing had happened, like nothing took place until I wrote it down. But it was just a way of loosening up. Then I know this will start a search, but there's no way to link it to me. I think it's all gone now, but I had an anonymous blog for years, you know, nothing offensive, but it was during the years of Blogger, and it was a chance to connect to people. And I just wrote the same kind of stuff, just observing stuff, saying stuff. You just have to like lose your sense of inhibition, I think. So for me, I guess, actually, I know what it was because I tried my hand at fiction and I am terrible. Like my imagination, I have one, but not a great one, I guess, because I could not write fiction. I don't know if any of you have tried, but like, I'm like, okay, now here's the basic gist of the story. Now, oh God, I can't. I'm amazed by fiction writers. So when I started doing all this observing, I eventually realized what I was doing. My interest was in other people's stories, and why did I have to make up my own? Because look at the world and how interesting it is. And I will recommend journalism to every student listening because it is the most thrilling profession, not just getting your stuff out there, but you're learning something new every day. You get to talk to people all the time. I mean, it's also a profession I realized years ago that requires you to have homework every day, which I realize is unappealing. And I was like, what did I do to myself? But it is so fascinating.
Great. That was a fantastic answer. And I really love the emphasis on writing every day.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we are always trying to instill in our students is the sense that, you have to come back and revise and tweak, and that writing is
I wasn't writing like, I mean, I just,
refining.
sometimes I'd write like 2 sentences and move on, but like I would think about the thing and it made me engage with something and made me engage with the words I used and just simple stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's it's a little bit more difficult than that question, but we're easing back in. It's like, so when you're mindful of how your reporting might sort of affect or impact future actions, so like things like war tribunals, for example, does it change the way that you report on or cover those events? Like, are you thinking, is that something that's going on in the back of your mind, like how it might impact the course of those events?
Yes, I mean, just the example in Congo, in the sense of like, I didn't want to publish because it could impact the course of justice. And in the case of Syria, where I was speaking to experts the whole time I was doing that crowd mapping, trying, like I said, trying to make sure I was gathering the right information that could be used in a potential court. So I tend to think about that. I don't know that everyone does and that you have to every time, but you do, like one of you said, your work is going to be one of the first records of history. So you've got to get it right. You've got to consider that.
I was muted. Sorry. I was just going to say, I think about this in the sense of, when you think about the people that influenced you in your life and something, I mean, you might still remember something that a teacher or a family member said to you that got lodged in you. And so I'm always mindful if I say something in class that might be flip or whatever, that to be careful about what gets lodged in. You're dealing with something that might, alter not only how we tell the story, of the past and the future, but actually the events that are unfolding as they're happening, right? It can be a really heady thing. I don't want to add even more pressure to the work that you do. And it is a kind of incredible responsibility and ethical responsibility to have.
Honestly, when I was working at the New York Times last year, I spent about a year doing their live coverage. I was reporting and editing the Trump coverage, like political live things. So if you go to New York Times, on the homepage, there are live sections now.
Right, yeah.
Expanding them all the time. And I was doing the COVID coverage. So both of those things, we were making choices every minute of the day. What are we going to tell? How are we going to tell it? What headline were we going to use? These are all choices that are so almost insidious, because it's so easy for journalists to manipulate a story in very subtle ways that the reader doesn't even realize. It's as simple as like, what headline are you putting on it? That takes it in a different direction, right? What are you emphasizing? Also, even what stories were we putting where, above each other? What was the most important thing? Were we going to take this one story and report it, or was it we were like, nah, that doesn't matter? And it felt like a huge responsibility to be at like the most respected paper in the world doing the major coverage of the moment and doing it live. So yeah, I completely felt terrified at moments, but at least I was working with incredible people.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. That just made me want you to come into my class when we talk about agenda setting and framing in my portion of American politics on the media.
I love what you guys are doing here. Really great. I didn't have any access to courses like this when I was in school.
So we have another audience member question. Again, this is probably not an easy one, but you mentioned that journalists will cross certain lines when publishing their work. Do you think crossing the line is justified when the journalist feels very passionately about an issue?
Audrey, thank you. I guess I would wonder what kind of example you're thinking of, or if one of you understand a little. Crossing the line for me, I mean, it could mean so many things I don't really know how to answer.
Perhaps, and Audrey, if you want to add in, please go ahead in the Q&A. But I was thinking back to an example you used near the beginning of your talk where you said that there had been, I think, a 14-year-old rape victim, and you mentioned that that person had already been traumatized more by speaking to another journalist.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe the passionate desire to get the story out
Mhm.
could be one thing. So they crossed an ethical line of some
That
sort.
actually was actually, yeah, I have a whole pent up kind of anger at journalists who do this. You know, I once heard a story about a male journalist who walked into a Congolese refugee camp and shouted, "Are there any rape survivors here?" I don't know if it's true, but it's kind of the example of how insensitive reporters can be. So when I was at the border of Turkey following the story and trying to find these people to speak to, women to speak to, and I knew about this one young girl, and I reached out to the hospital, and I reached out to, I had someone who was the connector between us, and she said by the time I got there that another journalist had come through. Basically, you know, every culture you're in is going to require a different set of circumstances. You know, you can't just sometimes barrel through right to the, you know, hard stuff. You've got to spend an hour having tea or whatever it is. You know, in this case, you're dealing with a young girl who's traumatized. Like, maybe you want her doctor present. Maybe you want, you know, someone to help you with the interview. Maybe her mother's there. I don't know. Or maybe you just speak to her mother and not her, right? Just factually, that person, a well-known journalist, did go on to tell that story and then wrote a massive piece about rape in war and about how she was equipped as the most sensitive type of ethical journalist and that she was really the right person to tell these stories and that most people weren't. And I was just sitting there like, don't make me say this publicly, which I never did, but that stuff like that happens a lot. You know, you see bad practices. But in terms of crossing the line there, I don't know if it would have been crossing the line, but I wanted to speak to her, but I was going to do it if it wasn't going to harm her. In the end, it wasn't my decision. The hospital decided that it was not, or her family decided, I don't know. But I was sitting in the hospital director's office waiting, and then eventually it was just no. But I don't know if that would have been. I mean, yeah, again, it's like how much agency do you give to people? Even if the mother said yes, is that okay to do to a child? Again, it's just this weird groping around thing sometimes. And the more experience you have, the more you think about these things. But yeah.
So we're going to begin to wrap up. And to begin with, I want to thank you, Lauren, for joining us today. I'm here at the Lytton Center online from Seattle. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your amazing stories and expertise. And really, I have to say, so inspiring to think about the kind of path-changing and path-breaking work that you do, but also the opportunities for all of us, especially our students to, in their chosen fields, or perhaps we have some folks who are watching this now are thinking about journalism and media, to think about how individuals have the potential to change the story and shift the narrative, and change the world in the process. So
can I add something to that?
Yeah, please.
Two things. One, at the beginning of my talk, I'm usually speaking to journalism classes, and I'll say like how many, or communications classes, or no, just saying like how many of you are sure you want to be a journalist, and like a few hands go up. And at the end, I ask again, and then there's like, there's many more. So I wish I could do that right now and just ask if any of you are thinking, pursuing it.
And that's, I mean, I think that's like to inspire that and to think about actually journalism can be fed by these different kinds of paths too, you know, like as you're studying and exploring, I'm thinking about studying international relations and thinking about how do I actualize this work that I'm doing.
But something you said really, I think was so important, because it took me so many years to realize this, but when I was working on this story about the Afghan journalists, and I was in touch with these two friends of mine, basically colleagues, who were working to get these other journalists out, one of them put me in touch with another woman who had spent many years working in human rights and was now independently working to get flights in to get journalists out. And she did. And we were just chatting back and forth. I'm at my desk in Seattle. She's sitting on her couch in California. And she's like, I just can't believe how much I can get done from like Oakland, you know, just sitting here. And I realized that a while ago, you know, going there is always going to be better when you're telling a story, obviously, but you can do a lot. You just have to start to recognize that. Yeah. And also I wanted to make one offer too. If anyone here really is interested in journalism, if you want to contact me, I'm happy for you guys to give out information. I'm happy to speak with you.
That's fantastic. Wow. Maybe that would be me.
It inspires me to speak to people who want to go.
Don't tell Dr. Bishop.
I didn't do that.
I'm very inspired. This is really amazing, fantastic work. And so we really want to thank you for joining us. And I want to put in a plug for our next speaker series event. And this event takes place on Thursday, October 28th at 1 p.m., where we'll be joined by Dr. Aurora Chang, who's a professor in education at Loyola University of Chicago. Her talk is titled "Rejection is Redirection: Why Your Mess is Your Message." Dr. Chang is a once undocumented Guatemalan immigrant turned hyper-documented professor of higher ed. She's the author of a really noteworthy book in ed scholarship, The Struggles of Identity, Education, and Agency in Undocumented Students' Lives, the Burdens of Hyper-Documentation. And Dr. Chang is also our second scholar in residence. So she's going to be working with some of our students, and I believe meeting with some of our undocumented students here at Ohlone. So we're very excited about our next talk. And we are just thrilled to have had you join us today. Thank you so much, Lauren Wolfe, for being here with us at Ohlone College. And we wish everyone in the audience a really wonderful, amazing day.
Thank you, guys.